Hey, tennis fans, you are listening to Match Point Canada, the official podcast of Tennis Canada. We're also members of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm Ben Lewis, joined alongside Mike McIntyre. As Mike, the season is officially over.
And we are almost completed our sixth season as the official podcast of Tennis Canada. And it's another one that's just flown by. It's funny because tennis often gets the critique of being the season that just won't end and how it's longer than every other professional sports season. But here we are, we're in December, and honestly, at this point, it feels like it did go by pretty quick. That the Aussie Open wasn't that long ago. Watching Yannick Sinner hoist his first major trophy and Arina Sabalenka her second. And there's so much to unpackage and get into. And we're going to look at some of the award nominees this year on both the ATP and WTA tours. And my goodness, are there ever a lot of awards? I don't know about you, but it took me considerable amount of time to properly digest the nominees and come up with, my picks for these awards. And there were certainly plenty of them.
Yeah, it is a long list whatsoever, completely. And I honestly didn't include every possible award there is. I don't think I've covered the sportsmanship award on our
Well, come
list.
on. Aren't they just going to give that to Rafa? I mean, as his swan song?
Oh, I hadn't is he a nominee? Because he didn't play much this year.
Oh, maybe not. I just thought, like, look, after giving
That
it
would
to
be nice.
Federer for like 50 straight years, and then
Rafa has a couple as well. Yeah,
Rafa's
yeah,
got a couple.
yeah.
I just figured they would just, but you're right. Maybe he's not even nominated for that since he didn't play too much.
Yeah, I will mention as the season, not just winding down, it is over. The ATP and WTA calendars are wrapped up. We do have a couple feature interviews, and one just done from this week. I had a chance to speak with Canadian Liam Draxel, so please check out that interview as he enjoyed a great season, kind of breaking through on the doubles side and in singles, 8 total titles, 6 in doubles. So check that out if you haven't. Mike, if you want to start on the ATP side. This is a topic we discussed, I think, a couple of months ago, and you were very firm on your feeling that Carlos Alcaraz was the player of the year. And I think a lot of things have changed since then in terms of how strong Jannik Sinner closed this season, his body of work. Who is your pick for ATP Player of the Year?
Well, look, a lot of things have changed. I agree with you, but my viewpoint has still not changed. I'm holding on to this one, and you're right. It was a few months ago that we first sort of began looking at whose body of work over the course of 2024 was stronger. This is a debate that you're going to get all kinds of different answers. I was talking to a coworker of mine today. Hey, who do you think between Sinner and Alcaraz? Because quite clearly to me, it's one or the other. You'd be hard pressed to throw a third one in there. Apologies to Alexander Zverev fans. But really, these are the two guys I think that merit discussion. And for me, it's Alcaraz, and here are my reasons. Yes, they each took two majors in, but to me, winning on two different surfaces, especially the back-to-back going from Roland Garros on clay to then Wimbledon on grass, is such an impressive feat to be able to capture those back-to-back within such a short space on the tennis calendar. So I give that more points than the Aussie Open, US Open bookmarks on the hard court slams of the season. Also, he got a silver medal at the Olympic Games. And look, it took a very informed Novak Djokovic who was out to prove and acquire that sort of last remaining item on his list. So a silver medal to me is a huge accomplishment there as well. And then when I look at the head-to-head between Alcaraz and Sinner, Alcaraz beat Sinner in all three of their 2024 matches. So that stands out as well. Not that it was, oh, he won a couple and he won a couple. It was pretty decisive. It was entirely decisive in those three matches. So for those reasons, to me, Alcaraz gets ATP Player of the Year.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Match Point Canada. If you'd like to follow along every week, give us a like below. Hit the subscribe button as we're trying to make 15,000 subs. It's a very fair argument, and I do think when you look at that head to head, that is one thing working in his favor. I do think the reality is Jannik Sinner is going to win this award, and that's separate from a debate of who you feel as Player of the Year. Just 73-6, 8 titles, two of the four Grand Slams, as we know, and then the way he closed the season. This is what kind of solidified it for me, going ATP Finals title and Davis Cup with Italy back to back.
Yeah, that's
And
fair for sure.
it should be noted, obviously, Alcaraz to me, his his most inferior surface, and he still plays great on it, is indoor hard court. And that's where Jannik Sinner is most dangerous, any type of hard court. And you look at the record, even outside matches, take Carlos Alcaraz out of the equation. Jannik Sinner was 73-3 this season, which is stupefying how good that is in terms of a win-loss record. 92% winning percentage overall. Closing the year as the world number one. I think for Alcaraz, he fought hard and got that silver medal. And a couple of the results that he had, which hurt his case, are because of going to Paris and having that long calendar, the extra long calendar playing the Paris Olympics, because he flamed out at the US Open. He just didn't seem right for the summer hardcourt swing post Olympics, where Jannik Sinner missed the Olympics. And I think he benefited from being the fresher of the two. But
And some people, you
yeah,
know
go
what?
ahead.
Some people are also going to say, and this could be used in both ways here, but the doping situation that Yannick Sinner
True.
had to face. Some people will say, well, it's amazing all that he accomplished given that huge distraction that he had to put up with. And others will say, well, hey, this is kind of a dark cloud hanging over his accomplishments this year because did he get any unfair treatment to be allowed to continue to play throughout the majority of 2024? So
Yep.
I'm not gonna, weigh in on that one. It's been dealt with, although it although it's still being appealed, so we'll see what comes of it next, I suppose. But there will be some that can use that argument one way or the other. I mean, I think there's a pretty compelling case, obviously, for Sinner, and I can see how he will perhaps likely be the choice. But to me, it doesn't change it. I'm gonna stick with Alcaraz, and I feel like for the reasons I stated, he just does it for me. And regardless of who wins it, it's going to be really interesting to see in 2025. How do these two go? Where do they go from here? Do they split the four slams next year as well between them? Does Djokovic reassert himself in that conversation? Does someone else come into the conversation? Or is it really going to be these guys sort of consolidating at the top of the men's game in the coming few years?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I do kind of wonder if Djokovic isn't a part of the conversation simply for the fact that is he going to even play enough to be part of that conversation? Is he going to have a busy enough calendar moving forward? We'll talk about big Novak news later in this episode, but continuing down the list of awards, an ATP Comeback Player of the Year, there were three nominees with two seasoned veterans, Marin Cilic and Kei Nishikori, and also Matteo Berrettini. All three of these players have been to Grand Slam finals. Cilic beat Nishikori back in the 2014 U.S. Open final. Who was your pick out of these three?
So I went with Matteo Berrettini, who, even though he's the younger one of the three, still feels like a veteran to me because he has been around for some time. Missed 7 months from the US Open 2023 until March of 24. His ranking fell out of the top 150. Now he's back up to number 35. His season stats are good, 32 wins compared with 12 losses. He was killer in Davis Cup, helping the Italians win, not only in September, winning all three of his matches to
Yep.
get to the final eight, but then also winning his two, I believe, two singles matches to help Italy defend their title. He had a clay court title in the spring in Morocco, grass court final in Stuttgart to remind us all of his, capabilities on multiple surfaces. He won a title on clay in Gstaad where he beat Felix, he beat Tsitsipas, and the next week, I believe as well in was it Kitzbühel? I believe he
hmm
won a title or made the finals there. So to me, you put all that together with his Davis Cup heroics there, and that's my pick for comeback player of the year.
It's a very good pick, and Matteo Berrettini might very well win it. He's not my pick, and maybe I'm just viewing this award a little bit differently in the scope that I feel like we've seen Berrettini play quite a lot of tennis, even between injuries over the past handful of years. And we've seen such a huge absence from Kei Nishikori. And I honestly wondered if we would ever see Kei Nishikori return to the tennis court. So similar to Milos Raonic, we really didn't know if he would come back. So for Nishikori to make a comeback this season, I mean, he only played 17 official ATP matches, but to win at the challenger level, close the year with a title as well, get back to nearly top 100. He's 106 in the world to finish the season. To me, shows just how incredible a talent he's always been when he's been healthy, and that's really been sort of the story of his career. When Kei Nishikori was regularly around the game and healthy, he was someone who was a top 10 player and someone who was making quarterfinals of Grand Slams regularly. So it was great to see him have this resurgence. And 34 years old. he could still have a few good years left if he can keep his body in shape. And shout out to Marin Cilic as well, who made a huge comeback from I think he was outside the top 700 when he won that title at some point this year. So that was huge as well. But my pick is for Nishikori.
You know what I'm liking so far is that we have opposite picks.
Yeah, me too.
And full disclosure to our listeners, to our viewers, like we haven't discussed this in advance. I mean, I only sort of finished my picks this afternoon, so I wouldn't have even had time to give you a heads up. But
Yeah.
we'll see how many end up being the same. If we move on to ATP Most Improved Player of the Year, we've got, I believe it's four players who are up for this one, and I'll throw it to you this time. Who did you pick between? Who do we got here? Jack Draper, Thomas Machak, Giovanni Mapesci Pericard, and Alejandro Tabilo.
As much as I wanted to show love to Alejandro Tabila, who is Toronto-born, and Petchy Pericard, who had that unbelievable run to a title recently, where he was just surfing out of this world, I picked the Brit Jack Draper, who had an outstanding season, finishing world number 15, two titles on the year. And what stood out to me is his ability to play against the very best. He logged a win over Carlos Alcaraz on grass, which is no small feat. And I mean, it didn't bother Carlitos too much as he turned around and won Wimbledon anyway. But Jack Draper took huge strides this season. And I think when we look into 2025, I had this discussion with Steve Weisman, possible players who could crack the top eight and be in the ATP finals conversation in 2025. I think Jack Draper is definitely one of those names to watch. I want to see more Grand Slam results from him, but he's my pick for most improved player of the year.
Well, the Brits who are listening will love to hear that, of course. And I do a fair bit of radio work for TalkSport in the UK, and they're always eager to shift the conversation to Jack Draper because I feel like they're just so desperate isn't the right word. That's not fair, but they're so eager for someone to continue in that line of
Hmm.
Tim Henman to Andy Murray. Just like they're very eager to put that pressure on Emma Raducanu because they want to have someone on the women's side as well. But that's a great pick. Well, we continue to I don't want to say disagree, but we continue to pick different players here because I went with the French player with the big serve in Mapesci Pericard.
Nice.
And the big justification for me was just the ranking increase. He
Yeah.
started the year outside the top 200 and he finished at number 31. And so that was the biggest jump from start to finish of the calendar year among the four nominees. The others all had sort of a considerable, consistent jump between them. And so for me, if you go from outside the top 200, where really, in 2023, you're not even in the conversation of making any of the tournaments that the top players want to play, and you finish the year in a spot where you're going to be seated at likely seated at the Aussie Open this year, to me that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, that's a great pick. I gotta wonder how dangerous he's going to be when Wimbledon comes around next year with that serve. Nobody is going to want to face Mpechi Pericard at Wimbledon or on any kind of fast surface. If we move along to newcomer of the year, there were two options here: Jakub Mensik, the Czech player, or Jerry Shang, and you can take it
Well, why
away.
do you think? Why do you think two options? Is it because there's tons of new players playing tennis, but does it mean these are the only two that had results that were
Yeah,
significant enough
I
to
I I
compare?
had that thought, and I was wondering about Fonseca, the young Brazilian player. Do you have to be a certain age to qualify for official newcomer of the year? Do you have to have a certain number of tournaments played? Maybe it has to be kind of a full official season where we had other teenagers maybe who played a broken up year, as opposed to Mensik and Shang who kind of played complete seasons.
It's just interesting because some of these awards you get four or five nominees, and here we've just got the two.
Yeah.
I mean, the similarities are pretty incredible in terms of they're both 19 years old, and their ranking is within 2 points or two positions, I should say, of one another, with Menchik being 48th and Shang 50th. I mean, to me, Shang, he had moments where he could have delivered more, and he was on the cusp of delivering so much more, like taking the first two sets off Casper Ruud in round three of the US Open, taking the first two sets off Grigor Dimitrov in round two of Wimbledon. Like he was so close to maybe running away with this category and just couldn't quite. Whereas Mensik, to me, I mean, pushing Djokovic in Shanghai,
Yeah.
beating Felix in straights in the opening round of the US Open, where we were all kind of like, whoa, what just happened here? He's got wins over Dimitrov, final in Doha. And in that tournament, I mean, he beat some top-notch players early in the year, like Davidovich Fokina, Andy Murray. He got his first top five win against Andrei Rublev, beat Gael Monfils before falling to Khachanov in the final there. He also dealt a blow to Denis Shapovalov in round one at the Aussie Open. So to me, between the two of them, he just had some more, eyebrow-raising moments consistently over the course of the season.
Well, we finally have agreed on picks, and yes, I went with Mensik as well. And my first opportunity to watch him, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that win over Denis Shapovalov. I mean, at the time, I was going in. You're wondering Denis Shapovalov. He'd missed so many months with the knee injury. Where is he at physically? Is he ready to kind of compete at the highest level? And I thought to myself, well, maybe Dennis doesn't look his best, but who is this kid who is blistering the tennis ball and moving very efficiently around the court, has some serious weapons? And it was Jakub Mensik. And sure enough, he parlayed that win into what I would call a great season, finals in Doha as well. And as you said, I mean, I watched that match against Djokovic as well, and he made Novak work very, very hard to get by and get through for that win. So I think Mensik has all the tools. Shang does as well. Don't get me wrong. To be, rising probably future top 20 players. I think both of them.
It's just exciting to be talking about the next wave, right? Like we get so caught
Definitely.
up in the big three conversation for all those years, or now the Alcaraz and Sinner conversation. But you can never forget that there's these names that are coming and impatiently waiting to join the conversation, and it'll be interesting to follow these two in 2025. Moving along now to the women's side of things, and WTA Player of the Year, despite the fact there are several who are nominated. I think to me, it's really a two-horse race between Arina Sabalenka and Iga Swiatek. And Ben, you can do the honors here of going first.
Yeah, look, to me, this one I didn't think too hard on, didn't think too long on whatsoever. Arina Sabalenka, who closes as the world number one of the season, was the best player of the year, without a doubt, in my opinion. And for her to win two more hard court majors, back up her title at the Australian Open was unbelievable. And then you just felt like going into the US Open, the one consensus I think we had when we were discussing it at the time is we felt like Arena was the odds-on favorite that you could really trust. That even if she wasn't going to win the title, she was going to go deep. And sure enough, she's arrives in the final, and she is playing an American finalist in Jessica Pegula, who's there for her first major ever. But Sabalenka has been so strong, particularly on the hard courts. And you look at how incredible a season she put together. And remember, she missed that grass court swing and she missed Wimbledon. And look at what she did post Wimbledon. Not only the US Open title, she won Cincinnati prior to that. She won Wuhan in the fall, and she nearly pulled it off with the WTA finals. Got stopped by Coco Gauff in the semis. But I would say just an unbelievable season from Marina Sabalenka. She beat all her key rivals in big matches as well, which I think is really telling. Some big wins over Iga Swiatek through the season and Pegula, as I mentioned. And I think it has to be Sabalenka for Player of the Year.
Yeah, that's my pick as well. And despite all the hard court success, she also made the finals in Rome and Madrid. So
Yep.
having success on clay as well, only to be stopped by Iga Swiatek, who's still dominating on clay. And I think that's my knock against Swiatek this year is she was kind of a one surface show in terms of her dominance on clay. Yeah, she had some early results on hard court, but as the season went on and in particular at the Slam, she was underwhelming at the majors this year. She hoisted another
Hmm.
title in Paris, of course, but third round Aussie Open, third round Wimbledon, and fourth round US Open. I mean, to me, the fact that she didn't even really make it into the quarters or beyond it at any more of those is holding her back. Clay court, absolutely, she's the queen of clay, and there's no one touching her right now. But to me, it was a fairly easy choice to go with Sabalenka on that one.
Yeah, and I think a key takeaway, just Sabalenka has now reached the quarterfinals or better at every slam she's played since US Open 2022. So that's a lot of consistency. And I understand she did miss Wimbledon, but even looking back at the Wimbledon she played the previous year, she was in the semifinals and had a great opportunity then. So you reliably know she's going to be going deep at any given Grand Slam she plays. Whereas I feel a lot more vulnerability with Iga Swiatek when it's Australian Open and a tricky third round, or US Open and maybe someone like Danielle Collins is waiting in the wings. You don't trust right now. I mean, it can certainly change in 2025 that Iga Swiatek won't have a hiccup in one of the early rounds of those other three majors outside the French Open.
Yeah, it doesn't have the aura of invincibility that she had maybe earlier in the season. I'll
Yep.
give you that one as well. I want to talk about the WTA Doubles Team of the Year, and to me, look, I'm picking with well, it's a mix of my brain and my heart, but I'm going with the 1.5 Canadian tandem, that being Gabby Dabrowski of Ottawa and Erin Routliffe, who resides in Montreal and is half Canadian, or as Canadian, I would say, as from New Zealand. And look, they finished the year on a winning note, winning the WTA finals, which was terrific for them. Semifinals at the start of the year at the Aussie Open, finals of Wimbledon. Missed the clay court season together as a team, which I think could have even pushed them further ahead. But Gabby wasn't healthy during that stretch of the season. Semifinals of the U.S. Open. Maybe a knock against them is not as many titles, but I think there were a couple in there. Finals in Toronto in front of the Canadian crowd. And to me, I just think like since they joined forces in the summer of 2023, they've been really just this wrecking ball on the women's doubles tour. And I don't even think they've reached their full potential yet. They haven't even played on clay together yet. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do this coming season. But with Routliffe assuming the number one ranking for, I know she didn't finish with it, but she held it for a good chunk of the middle portion of the season. So to me, call me a homer if you want to. I don't mind. I'm going with Gabby and Aaron on this one.
I'm really glad you picked those two because I didn't, and we were submitting award picks as well for the National Bank Open website, and I was waffling over the doubles selections for a while because a lot of the titles, a lot of the Grand Slams were spread out. There was no like big time definitive winner to me, but just Katerina Siniakova, the level of doubles she displayed throughout the season, the fact that she took home a gold medal as well in Paris, and then winning with Taylor Townsend at Wimbledon, Townsend's first ever Grand Slam doubles crown, I thought it was just too impressive to ignore, and that I gave them the nod. But Dabrowski and Routliffe got their measure of revenge, defeating them at the WTA finals, and I thought the way those two played at the WTA finals. Is going to set them up so well for 2025. If I'm looking at a draw for the Australian Open early on, I wouldn't surprise me at all to see them win down under to start the year. The way they closed out the season, I think that more big things to come, as you say. I think they're just going to get better and better together.
Well, here's hoping. And yeah, they have so much fun on the court together.
Hmm.
And Gabby's mentioned before that sometimes a doubles partnership is more like a business arrangement. And with these two, it's I mean, they take care of business on the court, of course, don't get me wrong, but they're having a great time together. And I mean, it's just fun to see two doubles partners and a tandem like that jive so well. And yeah, just looking forward to seeing what they can do moving forward. How about comeback player of the year on the WTA? There's some excellent
Yep.
options there. Who've you got for this one?
Yeah, look, we had Naomi Osaka, Paula Badosa, Karolina Muhova, Emma Raducanu, Amanda Anisimova, all excellent selections. And this pick, I will share. I went with my heart maybe over my brain, but I think she's completely worthy as comeback player of the year. And her story reminds me of Bianca Andreescu, where she really did need a mental break from the tour. And I had a chance to speak with her in Toronto before she made that run to the finals. I picked Amanda Anisimova for her to get her ranking back inside the top 40. To close out this season, flash just that unbelievable tennis that we saw at the National Bank Open, where she beat Arina Sabalenka on the way, scored some other, top 10 wins to get to the finals before losing to Jessica Pegula, was so incredibly impressive, reminiscent of what she was doing as a teenager when she was in the semifinals of the French Open. And I wonder, with a proper offseason, feeling mentally and physically refreshed now, I think she's going to be one of those top contenders to be back in the top 20 or higher for 2025, and someone who's always dangerous in a Grand Slam format, getting the extra day off.
Yeah, I sure hope so. And I certainly thought about throwing my vote that way. She was my number two pick.
Hmm.
Because of all the reasons you mentioned and a great mental health advocate now, which I think is important as well. But I tried to not to get too wrapped up in the sentimentality of it. And I found that Karolina Muchova was just a little bit more consistent
Yeah.
over the course of the season. And I mean, she's back to number 22 in the rankings. It was so impressive to me that, US Open, she was able to um, get back to, the same stage as a year before to defend those points. And sorry, I think I typoed in my prep sheet here, but US Open finals. No, was that, or was it quarterfinals? Sorry.
Yeah, quarters
Um,
and then semis and then losing to Pagula, but she was up a
yes,
set
semis.
and a
Thank you.
break if you remember. Yeah.
Thank you. So semifinals 2 years running and being able to defend those points where that was
Yeah.
definitely pressure on her. A final in Beijing where she beat Coco Gauff, who was, certainly one of the hottest players in the late stages of the season. Final on clay in Palermo as well. So to me, I think she was just really kind of reminding us of she can be a top threat. She could be a top 5 to top 10 threat. And I don't know if you can say that about Anisimova yet. She hasn't quite
Yeah.
been as high in the rankings. So that's why I went with Muhova for that one.
No, that's a great pick. WTA Newcomer of the Year. All of these could have been pretty good selections because all of them had their big time moments. Erika Andreeva, sister of Mira, Rebecca Sramkova, Zeynep Sonmez, Sane Kartal, and Lulu Sun. And I'll just let you know on my pick, just because that huge Grand Slam result in particular, beyond just balancing out who had the more consistent seasons. I picked Lulu Sun for just having one of the more memorable moments of the entire WTA calendar year, breaking through and reaching the quarterfinals of Wimbledon.
Yeah, well, same. I got the exact same choice as you. And I mean, look, all of them great options. Of the five of them, Lulu Sun's ranked the highest at the end of the
Yeah.
season. She's 40th in the rankings. I mean, some of them are a little bit further down there. So, to me, just how high you can take it as well speaks volumes. 23 years old. She's got so much time ahead of her as well. Played doubles with Aaron Routliffe at the Olympics. So, maybe that was swaying my decision a little bit. But yeah, it looks like we're starting to agree on, a few more of these as we go through, maybe 50-50 so far. And I think we've only got one award left. So let's see here. WTA Most Improved Player of the Year. Again, some terrific options. Probably a tough one. If I have to guess who you're going to pick here, only because you do speak about her a lot and her talents on the court, and I think she just impresses you continually with her level of tennis. But I'm going to guess you pick Danielle Collins.
You know what? I did not pick Danielle
Okay.
Collins,
See, how well
shockingly.
do you know your podcast partner? I guess I got to work on this one.
I think you know what I would have picked Danielle Collins if the latter half of her season had been a bit more consistent, I think. And this was very tough. You mentioned Danielle Collins as a nominee. We have Anna Kalinskaya, who you got to interview at the National Bank Open. She had a big breakthrough year inside the top 15. The result in Dubai, beating Iga Swiatek. Diana Schneider, who won 4 titles this season, all on, she won 3 titles on different surfaces. My pick did go to Emma Navarro, who I spoke to at the National Bank Open, and that was sort of the consistency building throughout the year. And you look at her progression at the Grand Slams, she does third round at the Australian Open, fourth round at the French. She goes quarterfinals at Wimbledon, and then one next semis at the U.S. Open. A huge win over Coco Gauff there, and I think just getting inside the top 10, that's what particularly stood out for me. You're kind of balancing like who's made the biggest jump in the rankings, who's had the most impressive year. I weighted the Grand Slams to kind of distance Navarro from the rest of the pack for what she did, particularly Wimbledon, the U.S. Open, going quarters and semis. She's my pick for most improved.
Well, you speak about consistency, and the consistency I'm seeing is you picking players you've talked to and interviewed
Yes.
this past
Yeah,
summer.
you've
So
got me.
I don't know if these players kind of like, slipped you a little something under the table to sway your votes here on the Match Point Canada Award show.
Yeah.
But I went with Diana Schneider, who I
Nice.
thought also, look, I got to be honest, I didn't really hear about her before last season. I know she played some college tennis, but wow, did she ever come out of nowhere for me personally in terms of what she accomplished in 2024. Titles on all surfaces. We got to see her play in Toronto. She looked great there too.
Yeah.
So to me, it was just like, yeah, meteoric rise. I think Navarro is excellent pick as well, and certainly seemed to build as the season went along, and I think is going to be, yeah, in the, mix of things this season as well. with all those great American players, I mean, I think they just push each other along as well. You know, the fact that they have such a group of them in the top 20, 25 of the women's rankings in particular. Um, but yeah, some awesome choices, and I think for these players, you know, just being in the mix, whether they win or not, just the fact that they're in the mix speaks volumes to what been able to do this year. And you know, the thing is, January comes around. You know, we're three weeks away basically from the start of the season already, and all of this means nothing. You know, like
I know.
this this episode is not one you're going to come back and I hate to say it, but listen to in January or February because it's you start again, and it's what can you do this season. And I'm already getting pumped for 2025.
Yeah, well said. As we kind of wrap up here with key news, let's finish with the biggest, in a year filled with so many big time coaching changes, I was not expecting the biggest splash to come at the tail end of the year, and I would say it did with Novak Djokovic hiring his friend Andy Murray to coach him for 2025, at least beginning at the Australian Open. And I guess we'll see where it goes from there. But how surprised were you by this one? He goes out and hires Andy Murray. And is this just a trial? Do you think it can last, throughout 2025 and who knows, even beyond?
Yeah, I mean, it did surprise me for sure because I'm not sure how to take it. Like, you're hiring Andy Murray, who's never coached anyone.
Yeah.
You know, yes, you're hiring a contemporary, you're hiring a peer, you're hiring someone who has just hung up his racket. But to me, does that say you're going for the best coach you can find? Does that say, hey, maybe I want to close out my career alongside like someone I think I'm just gonna get along with and have some fun with? Like, is he expecting Murray to push him to new heights? Is he? I don't know. Like it's to me, it's just there's so many question marks behind that rationale. And in terms of you mentioned like a year filled with huge coaching hires, particularly, you know, backloaded in the last couple months of the season. I don't know if that's the biggest to me. It might be the most like surprising, but in terms of biggest, I think like Osaka turning
Yeah.
to Patrick Mouratoglou, who's a proven coaching quantity. That to me was my biggest coaching change. This is the most, yeah, surprising and unexpected.
Well, I'll give you my theory on the coaching hire beyond what I have just from what Novak had said in like a 1 minute interview where he said he wanted someone incredibly experienced. He wanted a former world number one who's been through the rigors and played in huge Grand Slam matches and on big stages and has had, a big time career. Murray, to me, his game style and one of his greatest strengths on the court is he was a tactician and such a brilliant strategist on the court and in terms of understanding the game. No one's going to make any technical changes with Novak Djokovic at this stage. That's not why Murray is there whatsoever. I think he's bringing him in as a second pair of eyes to maybe give him a few strategic tactical ideas on how do I solve guys like Jannik Sinner or Carlos Alcaraz in the very late stages of my career? Because that's the biggest challenge that obviously faces Novak to this point.
Yeah.
I still think he can beat pretty much, 98% of the tour. It's those top couple of guys. And we don't know yet, can Novak beat Jannik Sinner when Sinner is dialed in? We saw him beat Carlos Alcaraz, yes, in one Olympic gold medal match. He really had to dig about as deep as
That
humanly
took
possible to
everything.
do it. It
That
took
took it all.
everything, and he was sobbing after because he left his soul on the court to win that match. So I think he needs a couple of solutions to beat the very best in the world, something he hasn't really required in a while.
We'll see if Alcaraz responds by bringing in Nadal to his coaching
Can you
staff, right?
imagine? Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah.
God. Let's continue on. I wish this weren't news late in the season. We already talked about it with Jannik Sinner and the doping test, and now Iga Swiatek out of competition. Apparently failed a doping test back in August. She was cleared, but technically faces a 1 month ban, which is now coming in the off season, and that means two high profile players now for the season, one men's player, one women's player, looking at doping bans, which for Iga, I mean, timing wise, that she's dealing with the ban now and she'll get to restart in 2025. Same with Jannik Sinner. Ultimately, has no effect on ranking or their ability to play.
It's such an unfortunate trend, and it's not doing any favors to the sport, obviously. And
Hmm.
you think of some sports out there that have the sort of the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the label, I guess, as being sports with a lot of doping going on. And I think of like cycling, for example,
Yeah.
and you just don't want tennis to fall down that path and be known as a sport where, oh yeah, but they're all using something. And to me, the biggest problem is, and I don't look at these athletes and nobody thinks of them as cheaters or as people who are trying to get an edge. And I'd like to believe that Iga and Yannick have just not been careful enough. But there's just no consistency, no rhyme or reason almost. It seems so arbitrary how these governing bodies of doping are applying these rules. And I can totally understand why some people are ticked off. And you've seen players again who've chimed in with some comments on this one. And it does give the optics that top players are sort of getting a bit of an advantage in terms of like things
Yeah.
not being announced when they're actually taking place, right? And so
Hmm.
it's very hard to see any legitimacy to how these rules are being applied. And if I was a lower ranked player, I'd be pretty pissed off too if I saw the two world number ones. Well, I know Swiatek's number two right now, getting I don't want to say a pass, but seemingly getting a little bit of um,
Preferential treatment.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it certainly gives off that appearance, which is not what we want. And we want not only transparency, but fairness and equity across the board, whether you're ranked, 1,200 in the world or you're ranked world number one. And that's why I think that's the biggest reason, without a doubt, you're
same.
seeing other athletes speak up about this. Saw Simona Halep was immensely frustrated with this outcome, seeing a peer of hers, deal with you. Why even call it a doping ban if it's being implemented out of season? Iga Swiatek's not missing a single match over
That's
this
so
doping ban.
strange. I mean, that's the strangest part of this one too, is the timing to
Yes,
choose now. Whoa. I'd be ticked too if I was Simona Halep. She lost a whole year. Who knows if we'll ever see her again after what she
for
had to go
sure.
through.
Yeah, I will say I'll make this one comment in defense of both Jannik Sinner and Iga Swiatek, which I just read. This is from the World Anti-Doping Agency Director Oliver Nigli, who said, "Today we face," and these are both similar to Sinner and Swiatek's cases of contamination and very small to basically negligible amounts of the drug that garnered the positive test. Nigli stated, "We face a contamination issue. There are no more doping violations than before, but laboratories have become much better at uncovering minuscule traces of prohibited substances. The trace quantities detected are so negligible that contamination could occur from even the most unsuspecting of actions." So
Interesting.
my takeaway from that is it's so easy to have a trace amount of potentially a prohibited substance passed on to you. Who knows how? Maybe you shook the wrong person's hand and you could get a positive drug test. So that I thought that was very revelatory coming from WADA's director specifically.
Right, right. Or you kissed the wrong person at the club or ate the wrong tortellini to just mention a
Sure.
couple of the
Yep.
excuses we've heard of in the past.
No
Hey, look,
kidding.
I hope it's the last time we have to talk about this for a while, and I hope in 2025 we
Same.
don't have something come out late in a season that sort of skewers public perception and confidence in how the sport is being, maintained.
Yeah, no, no kidding. I'll mention as well, just the past weekend, a goodbye and a proper farewell for Juan Martin del Potro. It had been a couple of years since we'd seen him on a tennis court, but this time exhibition match, an enjoyable experience compared to when he had been on the court a couple of years ago in tears, not really being able to move properly against Del Bonis in a professional match. This is an exhibition match with his friend Novak Djokovic in Buenos Aires in front of 15,000 fans. It was very emotional, but a beautiful goodbye for Delpo, who I think, I always view him as the friendly giant, one of those immense talents who you always felt if this guy just could have stayed healthy, how many slams could he have won? And he did get the one U.S. Open title, but countless wrist surgeries, pain to his knee. It's a sad story, but a phenomenal career. And I just hope he doesn't have to live with pain for the rest of his life because I know right now it's very difficult for him.
Yeah, so hard to hear that. And, you think of him as like, yeah, the gentle giant, but the sport has been anything but gentle to his body,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And my Delpo memories go back to the summer of 2008. I was covering my first event in DC, and he was there. And he had a couple of good matches over the course of '08 and '09 against Frank Dancevich,
Hmm.
actually. And I think Frank the Tank came out on top of those. If memory serves correctly, I'll have to go back and look. But I feel like they had some good battles, but Frank did well. Of course, Del Potro was just sort of coming along at the time, but just so impressed, by his size, his power, and how kind he was off the court as well, and yeah, what he was able to accomplish despite the injuries in the era of the big three is super impressive. And of course, that match against Roger Federer at the U.S. Open, I mean, we'll never forget how that one sort of turned and how he was able to. I mean, that's got to count to me. That's got to count like five slams for when he was able to win it and against his
Yeah.
opponent as well.
Yeah, 2 sets to 1 down against Roger at the U.S. Open. Pretty astounding. We'll wrap with a couple of our favorite moments of the year. ATP best moment of the year. I wonder if we're aligned. I'll let you go ahead.
I got to be honest, it came down to a little bit of crunch time for me on these choices, so I
Well,
didn't
that's
get to
fine.
put in as much of a, but sometimes it's better when you just go with your gut. So
Sure.
for me, the best moment of the year on the ATP was seeing Novak Djokovic win a gold medal. And you said a few minutes ago it looked like he left his soul on the court, and absolutely, for me, that was just such an epic victory. And regardless of whose camp you're in of the big three, you gotta respect that this was the one thing missing from his repertoire, really, and he went out and did it at the age of 38.
Wow, we are completely aligned. I also
Ah,
had
all right,
Djokovic's
nice.
gold medal victory in Paris. Yeah, just absolutely incredible. And I think you know what you look back at the four Grand Slam finals. It's a little. I don't want to say unfortunate. I mean, sometimes it happens this way. The Australian Open final was fantastic, but the Wimbledon final, as dominant as Carlos Alcaraz was in that match against Novak, was very underwhelming. It wasn't something that stood out, similar to the U.S. Open final center beating Taylor Fritz. It wasn't like a specifically special memory, and you just that to me was one of the best matches of the year, and just seeing the emotions flood out of Novak after he won, how much it meant to him. The fact that he's having one of the best moments of his entire career at this stage is just so impressive. So that has to be my choice.
Let's talk about best moment of the year on the WTA. And as I was just talking with you, I'm like, oh, am I going to switch my pick here or not? I don't have one that's maybe as stand out. I'm going to change my pick actually and go a little off board, but I'm going
Sure.
to say seeing Jessica Pegula make her first slam final and doing it on home soil for her in the United States. I mean, she's just been a pleasure to talk to over the years and someone who got, rightly or wrongly, but got her fair share of criticism for not being able to get past the quarterfinals of a major despite being ranked as high as number three in the world. And so to see her get that off of her shoulders, no longer have to carry that weight around. And I'm really excited to see. I know she's 30, so a little bit older than some of the other top players there, but I'm excited to see if this propels her to a little bit more now at the majors in 2025.
I love that pick. I'm going to go with this coincided with my match of the year. Coco Gauff beating Zheng Qinwen in the finals of the WTA Finals, Riyadh. Coco's ability to bounce back after what had transpired at Flushing Meadows with the disappointment there and the ugly loss and issues with double faulting, having to part ways with Brad Gilbert, making, a late season change, and for her to surge on in the fall and have such an incredible run at the WTA Finals, beating Iga there, beating Arina Sabalenka there, and then beating Kien Wen in the finals in what I thought was just the match of the year. So topsy turvy, just back and forth, a 3 set epic, which had a bit of everything. Like unbelievable finish to the year for Coco Gauff, which was my pick for best moment of the year. And my honorable mention, I'll just say, was Naomi Osaka pushing Iga Swiatek to the brink at
What a
Roland
match.
Garros. Yeah, yeah, totally.
Could you imagine what that would have done to Iga's season if she had lost
No
there?
kidding.
I think we would have seen a coaching change a little bit earlier from
Yeah,
her if that had
yeah,
happened,
I
actually.
think so. Yeah, no,
Well, our very last thing that we want to end off this week is bold predictions for 2025. You go first with your bold
okay.
predictions this time.
I'm gonna go first. It it was my best moment of the year featured this athlete. Now my bold prediction for 2025. Novak Djokovic will announce his retirement after the US Open is my
Well, that
bold
is a pretty that
prediction
is
for
a that is a
2025.
bold prediction. Wow,
Yep.
okay. Well, I wrote down here that Roger Federer unretires for Wimbledon, but I'm I'm just joking with
No?
that
Okay.
one. Although I'd love to see it. But my bold prediction involves the same player you're talking about, but not nearly as bold as yours. You really went for it with yours. I just picked that Novak will win his 25th slam this coming season.
Okay. Okay. I consider putting that, but I was like, he's won so much. Is it bold? I don't know. But hey,
Yeah,
people
I
are
question that as well. So.
people are questioning it though because he didn't win a slam in 2024, so that's fair. I'll give you my WTA's bold prediction for 2025, and you just mentioned her in your best moment of the year. My bold prediction: Jessica Pegula wins her first major.
Oh, I like it. Very
Yeah,
nice. I wanted to give a bold prediction about a Canadian, but I don't want to jinx things, and
that's nice of you.
so what I've gone with, and again, it's not maybe as bold, but no, Naomi Osaka back to the top 20 in the sport. I think things are really going to click with Patrick Mouratoglou. I think it takes some players a little
Yep.
bit longer for sure to get back in the swing, and she was gone for a full year, so let's give her a little bit of grace with that one. Not only is this my bold prediction, but I'd love to see it happen too because I think
Yeah.
the sport is better when you've got Naomi Osaka in that upper echelon.
100%. Completely agree with you there. This was a fun episode.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how far off or how much on we are with our ATP and WTA awards picks because the answers and the choices are, I believe, are coming later in the week. So you'll find out. Guys, thanks so much as always for listening to Matchpoint Canada. We will talk to you next time.